I'm Dustin Baker. This is VikesNow, the February 9th edition. It's my mother's birthday. Happy birthday, Mom. We're going to talk about the Vikings cap casualties today. There are 7 possible players who could be jettisoned via outright release. So I'm going to chat about those today, but I'm going to start with a gigantic disclaimer that not all 7 of these guys will leave the team due to cap casualty. These are the candidates, the ones that, as Kwesi Adofo-Mensah analyzes the cap, you could reasonably get to a place of cap savings with a simple release. Saying, all right, thanks for your service, go hit free agency. So I would say that a handful of these 7 will experience this fate. There's a couple who could be traded as well, but there are certain players who won't be cap casualties, who just cannot, like Brian O'Neill. Why would you do that? Kirk Cousins, way too much money to be guaranteed money to be outright released. So those guys, of course, are not in here. But there are ones whose contracts have been schemed or gamed to have this inflection point in 2023 where you're like, maybe it's time to move on. So these are those 7 men. I got my notes here because of all the money figures. So bear with me. I wrote about this on VikingsTerritory.com. If you've already read that, bless your heart. You could just turn off the rest of the episode. Or if you want a video explanation, this medium, that's what this is for. So these are in alphabetical order. They're not in order of who's on the chopping block first. It's just dudes that could reasonably be gone in alphabetical order. The first one, smacks you right in the mouth, is Dalvin Cook. He's scheduled for a $14 million cap hit in 2023. If he's cut before June 1st, the team would save $7.8 million. If he's cut after June 1st, they'd save $11 million. So keep that in mind when they get there. Here's the reason why Dalvin Cook isn't a guarantee to be back. The new leadership regime of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell may not agree with paying running backs the big bucks. Usually when you have an analytics-focused philosophy like Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is associated with, you do not pay running backs the big bucks. So in that vein, it was kind of surprising that Cook was around last year. And then on top of that all, while Cook had some humongous game-changing runs against the Dolphins, the Colts, there's a couple other ones too. I think there was 4 of the Bills, of course, 50-plus yard touchdown runs that were absolutely magnificent. His rush yards over expected was near the bottom of the NFL, which usually indicates a performance-related decline. And then, fast forward 2 months, and you got dudes like me on shows like this talking about his cap hit, and the running back by committee approach is probably coming to the Vikings, whether that's some combination of Ty Chandler, Kene Nwangwu, and a free agent, or if they retain Madison for cheap and then pair him with Ty Chandler. I just don't think Cook is in the cards at this price point for 2023. And on top of that all, the whispers this week are that he's not interested, Cook, in taking a pay cut. All of that is a recipe for him. He ain't going to work here anymore. So the cap savings, whether it's before June or after June, are tantalizing because you can take that money and go sign free agents. But I do not expect Dalvin Cook to be on the Minnesota Vikings in 2023, so you should start to prepare for that now. The next one is a similar position, is fullback, is C.J. Ham. Here's the deal, and I wrote this in the Vikings territory piece. Listen, he's a wonderful football player. He is a tremendous fullback who can even catch the ball like a tight end. However, he was only used in the O'Connell offense 15% of the time. He only played 15% of offensive snaps. And he's on tap for about a $4 million cap hit. That doesn't make sense. Why, if you don't use fullbacks in your offense, would you have the guy around for vibes? I get that there's leadership angles and totally agree with those. But I was surprised they kept Ham last year, and I think this is when the cap pays the piper and he will be a cap casualty. His cap hit is $3.8 million, and then if they release him, he has no post June 1st anything. They would save $3.05 million. So unfortunately for the Augustana product, which is where I live here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, I do believe Ham will be a cap casualty, and I'm just not too sure about Cook if he could be traded, but I don't expect either man back in 2023. Next is an off-ball linebacker. Next to Ham, this is probably the one I would put guaranteed to be gone, beyond the shadow of a doubt. Jordan Hicks. He came and arrived to the Vikings last year from the Arizona Cardinals, Eagles before that. He is slated for a cap hit of $6.5 million, and if he is outright released, the Vikings would save $5 million. The dead cap penalty is only $1.5 million. Why is Jordan Hicks a lock to not be on the 2023 Vikings? Simple. Brian Asamoah looked tremendous in a very small sample size. He looked hungry, athletic, freakish, and he's going to be a starting linebacker for the Vikings next year. Whether or not they keep Kendricks, we'll get to him in a second. That one is more of up for debate, but Hicks is not a longtime Viking, nor do I believe have that leadership credo that Kendricks does in the locker room. But if I can virtually guarantee anything about this entire list, is that Jordan Hicks will not play for the 2023 Vikings. He was pretty decent in 2022, but they have a cheaper, younger rookie from last year option in Brian Asamoah, and frankly, it's his time. Hicks was kind of like a patch over, like, a quarterback would do to a rookie guy. That's kind of what Hicks was to keep the ship afloat in Ed Donatell's defense. And now it is Asamoah time. And I think Hicks is guaranteed to be gone while the team saves $5 million. Next is his counterpart, Eric Kendricks. This one is trickier with the Brian Flores hire because we know Kendricks is a good linebacker. He's just not quite as fast as he used to be. And in the guts of the defense, especially against the Giants in the playoffs, it seemed like we were just too slow. And I think a lot of that had to do with the age 30 linebackers in Kendricks and Hicks. The 2023 cap hit for Kendricks is $11.4 million. And if they outright release him, don't trade him or anything, they would save $9.5 million. So what you could do is take the $9.5 million that you saved on Kendricks and the $5 million that you saved on Hicks, and go get a Tremaine Edmonds or David Long or a linebacker who's established in their mid-20s, and you could start the clock all over again on the good part of Kendricks. That's just how the business works, as ruthless as it sounds. But by cutting both off-ball linebackers with Brian Asamoah chilling to be a starter, you can use those dollars to go get Tremaine Edmonds, who's only 24 years old and has been in the NFL since 2018. So I think it is a shoo-in that Hicks is gone and probably Kendricks, mainly because the cap savings is about $10 million. Number 5 is probably the biggest nothing burger on the list, but I have to put it in there because there is some money, is Chris Reed. He was the Vikings starting center in Week 18 in the playoffs, and once he got the bad episode at the Packers out of his memory, he played pretty well. When we signed him last year, we theorized that, all right, he'll be the starting right guard because he's a pretty decent journeyman guard. But nope, they went with Ed Ingram, and Reed was on the outside looking in until Garrett Bradbury got hurt, and bada bing, he was able to play center, and he did quite well for 2 games. His 2023 cap hit is $2.75 million, and if they release him, they save $2.5 million. So it's this really tiny guaranteed money. And you have to ask yourself right now, when you're thinking about Chris Reed, is a backup guard worth $2.75 million? That's up to you to decide. I'm not sure. We already know the offensive line is, besides Bradbury in the middle, is solidified. That's another thing. Maybe they could go with Reed at center. Who knows? But aside from Bradbury, all of the pieces of the offensive line are spoken for, and that leaves the Vikings paying $2.75 million for a backup guard. They might be able to get some dude in the 6th round of the draft who's cheaper than that. So Chris Reed is on there. He's number 5, winding down the list. The next one is another one with the Flores hire that's probably less likely to happen in terms of a release, is Zadarius Smith. His deal last year around this time was structured in a team-friendly way so that if he struggled in 2022, which he didn't, he was wonderful for the first 9 games and then sputtered a little bit. He didn't suck down the stretch, but the sacks disappeared, the pressures remained, and he wasn't quite the defensive player of the year type that he was from weeks 1 through 9. But he's on deck to earn a cap hit of $15.5 million. And if they cut him, they would save $12.15 million. Now, because they hired Flores and not some schmo from the Texans, like the assistant safeties coach for the Texans, they have told us through their actions that they're going to revamp this defense in a single offseason. Usually when you bring a guy like Flores in, you don't start subtracting stuff from the cupboard. You leave it there and enhance it. So I do believe Zadarius Smith will be back. However, I'm not the general manager, and if the Flores defense doesn't support Zadarius, then he could be jettisoned for a savings of $12.1 million, and in the summer it ballooned to $13.8 million based on the way the contract is structured. But he is indeed a cap casualty candidate. And the last one, and probably the most painstaking, is Adam Thielen. I'm not sure if there would be a market for trade for Thielen, but here's the deal. Let's see, what did he end up with? 714 receiving yards as a WR2. And there were, 3 or 4 emphatic games where Justin Jefferson was neutralized. In those situations, they're probably going to accelerate as teams figure out how to game the Vikings. You need a WR2 that can amass 1,000 yards by himself. That used to be Thielen. Indeed. It was Thielen from 2016 until last year, injuries notwithstanding. But in this new system, he wasn't quite as productive. I don't know if that was his fault, if he indeed has slowed down, or if it was just the product of what O'Connell does. His cap hit is about $20 million, and they would only save $6.4 million by cutting him before June 1st. However, in the summer, if they parted ways with Thielen, then they would save $13.4 million, and that's more noteworthy. So I think if any movement happens on Thielen, I'm going to say that it'll probably be in the summer. Who knows? He could be traded before then. But I just don't expect him back with the 2023 Vikings because I don't expect him to take a pay cut. And he's already hinted at he believes that he's still productive. And I think he could land with a team like the Cleveland Browns, where Kevin Stefanski works, or the Denver Broncos, where George Payton is a general manager, or the Texans, as I joked about, because they don't have a whole lot of wide receiver options, or even the Packers, because he and Rodgers are buddies. I guess if Rodgers went to the Raiders, that'd be another landing spot. We'll probably do a show about Adam Thielen landing spots just to get those out in the open. But that's it. I think out of all of these dudes, Hicks, Ham, Kendricks is a lot of cap savings. Those are up there, but we'll just recap them from the bottom to the top. Adam Thielen, wide receiver. Zadarius Smith, edge rusher. Chris Reed, backup guard. Center, Eric Kendricks. Jordan Hicks, both off-ball linebackers. C.J. Ham, the longtime fullback, and then Dalvin Cook, who's been with the team since 2017. Those are the guys that are candidates from moving on via outright release. If you want to, read it in the flesh, you can go to VikingsTerritory.com or just type in Vikings cap casualties into Google, and that will give you the literal aspect. That's all I got. I'll be back probably tomorrow, if not Monday, to talk about maybe some trade candidates, get all this offseason stuff out in the open. If you have suggestions about stuff I should cover, put them in the comments. I like reading that feedback from you guys. But as for Thursday, that's all I got. And skol, baby.